Welcome to Our Drummers Musicians. I'm your host Luke, and today I have the absolute honour of speaking with one of Australia's greatest musicians, drummer and percussionist David Jones. David is a true virtuoso, known for his extraordinary skill, creativity and deep musical wisdom. He arrived with a case full of special percussion instruments, some of which made their way into our conversation, adding another layer to what was already an incredible experience. In this episode, we talk about his first instrument, the bongos, his journey through music, the impact of mentorship, and how spiritual practice and meditation influences his playing. We also discuss sound creation, recording, and in a surprisingly deep and insightful moment, David shares how he once felt a sense of inferiority as a drummer due to a lack of harmonic knowledge when presenting his compositions. It's a reminder that even the most prolific artists are human, navigating insecurities and the weight of musical stereotypes. It was a truly special conversation, and I'm so grateful to have had this time with David Jones. I hope you enjoy.
And if I was to play one of these, that even off mic, oh, that's great. Beautiful. Cool.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for bringing these. That's so lovely. They're all beautiful to look at and listen
Aren't
to.
they? Yeah, they're pretty special.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's absolutely no structure to these.
I like that. I'm a natural improviser, so
Yeah.
it's definitely the style I like.
I also feel that, there's so much information about you because you've been playing for so long
Mm-hmm.
that it's kind of nice just to be able to have a conversation
Yeah.
rather
I
than
think so
like
too.
a formal history of the percussionist that is David Jones.
Yeah.
But maybe because you brought these beautiful instruments, could I ask, were you always interested in the vast array of percussion, or did it start more about rhythm and drums rather than maybe sound?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Basically, I started drawing when I was very young.
Oh.
Now, it seems like it's not related to drumming, but it is. And I used to love those Derwent pencils. You could get a whole span of these different colours. And I didn't get into painting so much. It was actually drawing. And love all of the texture, colour, all of the intricate sort of patterns you could get into, and that became drumming later, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So all of the visual sense is really very much how I perceive of music.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course through the ears and through feeling, but yeah, the visual sense is a big one for me. Yeah, and so it became, I suppose most young kids, play pots and pans and whatever, whatever's available in the home and the kitchen particularly. And, the old saying, a kitchen is an amazing place for a percussionist. So it all comes to life. Even, the sink can sound like bongos. The different aspects of the sink.
Yes.
So I was always, creating with fingers at first, and then when my parents got me just a little bongos, it was the first thing. And that is significant because it wasn't sticks,
Yeah.
So even though I was using little, chopsticks or knitting needles or whatever to create sounds, the first instrument I actually got was a set of bongos. So because of the two little drums, I'd even then pitch bend, scratch with the nails,
wow.
Trying to get as many sounds as possible.
You're so curious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So 54 years later or more, it's still the same. I feel there's a childlike wonder that it's not even keeping it alive. It's just part of me. It's the way I process sound and creativity, and even our conversation now, the improvisational creativity, thinking outside the box, basically. That's always a big part of life for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you do much listening for pleasure?
I do now, yeah. This is a longer story, and I'm just sort of jumping forward from being a little kid, but much later when I was age 26 and I took on a meditation path, lifestyle.
Yes.
Then for a long time, by choice, I didn't listen to much music at all. It was only mainly sort of ambient things, and because I really wanted to explore, like I did with my music, 100%, I wanted to explore what was possible. And a lot of it was to do with, and still is, to do with stillness and silence, and as we know in the physical world, I call it relative silence. You don't actually get true silence, do you? There's even the hum of machines or trams in the distance or birds, and that's life. That's beautiful. There's always something vibrating somewhere, living things and also machine things. So yeah, I'm just so interested in, especially when I started meditating, to be very still and very silent, which is it's right on the other end of the spectrum, isn't it? From drumming.
Absolute opposite.
And I wanted to bring that into the drumming somehow, and it took some time to integrate, because one activity, of course, is sitting eyes open or eyes closed. It can be both, either one. And meditating, not moving and just hardly breathing and going very deep. And then the other one, which is all four limbs, as you know, so, it's such a whole body experience, drumming. So to integrate them, it became a sense of awareness, there's an awareness whilst playing. I remember one night, it's a funny story actually, in Sydney, because when I took on the meditation path, I moved from hometown Melbourne and went to Sydney. I just needed to change everything. It was a complete change, relationship as well. Left all my friends here, didn't even tell them what was happening.
Oh, wow.
They thought, what's happened to David? He's joined a cult or something,
Yeah.
And in a way, it was so extreme. It needed to be so extreme from where I was.
Right.
The pendulum had to swing completely. So anyway, I'd got to Sydney, and it was one of those situations where, you see in a film or hear in a story about a magic phone call or something, something happens that you think, that doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
But I had one of those, which was, I rang Don Burrows, because Don, being an icon of Australian jazz, he had a television show on the ABC on a Sunday night, I think it was, a 1-hour program. Can you imagine this?
Oh.
Of national jazz artists, that he'd featured from Australia, and internationals. And so he was the host of that for quite a few years. Yeah, incredible. And Don was quite a household name, Not so well known now. And also because of the internet, you're either very across it or not. And Don, unfortunately, there's not much footage or whatever of Don, but what an incredible musician.
Can I ask, was it a performance show or like an interview show?
Performance, yeah. So there were whole parts of concerts, interviews as well. But anyway, the connection with Don was in 1983. He invited Pyramid, a band that I co-founded, to come to Sydney, and we had the whole program, which was pretty special and unheard of, really. A jazz fusion band to have the whole 1-hour program, and he guested on one of the track, one of the pieces, and it became a vinyl record from that, and with a live audience in the ABC studio. And we even had a whole day to set up the day before. It was just like a luxury. I mean, you can't even imagine things like that happening now. Anyway, so this connection with Don, when I got to Sydney after a big life change, huge, complete change, I just rang him to say hello. And he said, "You mean you've moved? You're not just visiting?" I said, yeah, I've just moved. It was in like the last few days, He said, "Oh, Dave, that's fantastic. Would you like to do some gigs?" and would you like to do some teaching? He didn't say join his band, the number one jazz band in Australia.
Yeah.
And, and teach at the conservatorium. He was just very casual. He just said, would you like to do some playing? Or would you like to do some teaching?
Wow.
And I've just landed the two best gigs in Sydney, jazz gigs anyway.
Whoa.
And I just arrived.
Wow.
It was quite dreamlike, And I'd made a big change in my life, so I wasn't pursuing things as much. I wasn't... actively saying yes to everything and doing heaps of gigs purposely, to really explore my spiritual life. And so music was not on the back burner, but it was just more integrated over a period of time. It wasn't everything, because music was my religion for a long time. And now I can feel how those both are one and the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, so music making really... when you're in the zone, if you really create the zone for yourself before you play and then maintain that through, it is meditation. And I can't imagine now, many years later, 40 years or something, about 40 years of meditation every day, that I can't imagine doing anything without meditation.
Right. I wonder, because you went so deep into your drumming, that it took such a radical inversion for you to then get to this place where now it is of oneness rather than the separate clean cut, I'm going to move and completely change.
Yeah, things were out of my hands, It was really destiny calling and a very deep undercurrent of I can't remain the same. Because I was pretty lost.
Right.
I was very, very lucky. I was playing 3 nights a week when I was 14. It can't happen now. I know it's a very different scene now. But it was the Bridge Hotel in Richmond, just around from the old Channel 9. And the main singer, guitarist, David Langdon, he was a copyist for the Channel 9 band. And so there was all this connection very, very early with kind of not just the professional nature of things, but with some of the elders of the music tribe, if you like. So I was very, very fortunate. I was mentored by a lot of older musicians, and I didn't even realise until I came back to Melbourne how much I'd been looked after in the early days, because I started to do the same thing.
Right.
And so, this integration of the meditative state, I'd got to a point where I'd had such a full career up to age 25 that it was the classic, okay, well, now I go to, say, New York or Paris or wherever it is, Berlin, and do the same. It might be better pay, bigger audiences, but I've done it. And so there was an emptiness there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so because it wasn't based in, there wasn't a foundation of spirituality for me. With great respect, I was brought up as a Catholic, but I'd left that in terms of being a, real, I would say, committed Catholic. I left that in early teens, mainly because I wasn't getting the answers that I wanted and needed, but also, there was a whole lot of things missing for me. This is personally for me. And so it began this deep, at times desperate search, and then into alcohol because of, the music. You're always around, hotels and restaurants and whatever, and there's always alcohol. But also, without going into too much depth of family history, there was also, toxic lineage in my father's side with alcohol as well. So even though I vowed never to be the same, I ended up, if not alcoholic, I was pretty close to it, wiping myself out pretty often. And it was also, if I look at it with respect for myself, with a sincere feeling, what I was wanting to do also was to maintain that euphoria that would happen through music. Because, it's like you have this fantastic concert and there's this big kind of drop
Yeah.
after. Like, what now?
Yeah, the come down.
Yeah, the come down. And so there's wild fluctuations, So that was partially there too, to want to maintain a sense of a high, really.
Yeah.
Which, as we know, in life it's not possible to do that. Really what I was wanting was a stability. The fluctuations were not so dramatic, and stability and balance, and that was to come much, much later. But so the integration was slow and gradual, but I was practicing a lot, and I still do with meditation. And now, when I teach, when I play, when I record, it's always from stillness first. Breathe. Be in the zone and then play. And even, having a meditate before I go into something too, in the car, even before I go into a place, and just set up my consciousness, the awareness. So it's such a beautiful path, it's an ongoing path of understanding that the highs that we want can be sustained, but it's not so high that it's out of control too. There's much more balance to it.
It is interesting while you were describing that, it was making me think that like the performer's life has such a short amount of time, like at the peak playing, and then, maybe the set is an hour, or maybe you're doing 2 sets and it's 2 hours or something. But then that's it for the whole day, and maybe that was it for like, that was the big show for like a whole week, or you were preparing it for a month or something.
That's right. If it's a one-off, wow, there's a huge mountain to climb, even with promotion, for your own projects. And and if it's someone else, with you touring and things, there's this constant sort of traveling. And yet you're right. I mean, for 1 hour or at most 2 sets in the evening, but everything else is waiting. And flying and cars and then set up, and it's exhausting and can be very wonderful, but most of it is hard work, and most people don't realize that, and they don't need to realize that. It's part and parcel of what we do as a touring musician. But say if we're in a particular city and doing, our own projects and projects for other people, then according to what's going on, there is a lot of energy to conserve. I remember an older musician saying that about touring, just to relax into it. Because, you can get high from the travelling. It's like, oh, great, on another plane, And the first year or so of touring, when the first tours that you ever do, it's very exhilarating, it feels very special. And then the exhaustion, comes in, because usually the flights are early morning and there's late nights and not much good quality sleep, different beds, different hotels. And now for me, since 1984, the meditation lifestyle, which incorporates, now it's vegan, I was vegetarian from then, and so I do my own food as well. So there's a lot to plan for, when I'm traveling. And that's fine. I'm just used to that. But I prefer not to do a lot of it.
Sure.
Yeah, these days, Because I remember, I was with John Farnham for a while. That was 18 months. And that was well before the meditation path. So that was wild days. That was the other side of the pendulum. That was pretty wild. I'll probably leave it at that. I won't go into too many stories. But suffice to say, the pendulum swing was complete. From hedonist to monk. Now I'm somewhere in between.
Wow.
Yeah, much more approachable. And I mean, it sounds extreme, and it was. I really went into the spiritual path so much that I didn't even shake anyone's hand for 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Went very, very deep inside.
What was that about?
Okay.
If you're happy to...
Yeah, absolutely happy. Yeah. So even going into, the venues were still smoking venues at that stage. So that was hard too, physically. But also I was very, very aware of, once I was into a beautiful meditative state, a spiritual state, very heightened, very aware that any other energy coming in, there was a little bit of fear there that I'd drop my state or I'd be affected by the atmosphere of the place or people, whatever. And I mean, for performers anyway, sometimes people come up and shake your hand just before you go on there. You've got a sweaty hand. Now, what am I going to do with that? I've got this wet hand now, you know.
Yeah.
So there's practical sides to it. But what I was going into was actually no influence. No physical influence for some time, you know, for a long time. And it was very powerful just to be intact in your own aura. But something happened around the 4 or 5 year mark, and it was a deep realization that if I'm in a high state, nothing really can affect me. So it's the opposite way around. I'm actually able to be a conduit and give something. So not to be concerned by that at all.
Yeah, interesting.
So it changed, you know. It actually did the flip to the opposite.
Yeah.
That's okay. I can be the influence here, you know, hopefully not in an egotistical way, but I can be a conduit of beautiful energy, divine energy, and not be affected. But in fact, be able to give something. You know, have the feeling of giving rather than trying to keep safe.
Yeah.
And protecting, which is a fear-based thing.
What was it like doing that in like the context of a band? And especially like, you know.
Well, it was very interesting because I remember having every Monday was a silence day that I had created for myself. It wasn't part of necessarily of the spiritual path that I'm part of, you know, that I'm studying for a long time. But those sort of things were encouraged, but not at work. So I'd turn up in the basement in Sydney in a silence day and just show a little written sign saying,
yes,
I'm having a silence day.
Wow.
And people were really intrigued. They said, wow. But they remembered it too later, years later. They said, oh, David, I remember those silence times you had and you're still playing like powerfully, totally getting into the music, but, you know, not speaking. It actually really affected me in a beautiful way, you know. So, you know, when we look at music and what really it is language. Probably one of the last universal languages on the planet. And so I've been in Japan where, you know, playing with a jazz band in clubs and things, and we can hardly have a conversation because of the nature of our language, you know, English and Japanese. But when we get on the stage, you know, someone starts into Autumn Leaves or whatever it is, and you know exactly what's going to happen. You know, and then you're conversing in the language of music. So I find that so fascinating. So it's not just the music notes, but we're also conversing with energy, with connection through gesture, through eyes, through vibration. And of course it takes the form of, you know, assuming that you've got a whole lot of form to deal with those improvisations. You know, you understand structures and forms. So even like this, you know, just having a little silence in between is beautiful. That's a natural breath and respect to each other. So same in music.
How do you feel about it now in, let's say, like your Patreon and like social media world where the music is so like widely accessible, but no longer physically connected in the same room or space, or not that that's the only thing you do, but
sure. No, look, that's a great thing to bring up because it has actually changed a lot, a tremendous amount. You know, the world is different. And not just because of the pandemic, but I think for a long time now, the online world has become so much part of our inner space, our way of dealing with life in general, the way of connecting. I mean, the original plan for Facebook was to connect people. And if we still use it on that same level, you know, the original intention, the pure part of it, it can be used for good. So that's why I'm seeing it. I call it the currency of goodwill. Yeah, because really, I don't make a cent from it, you know, in terms of my career. But possibly I do, because people know I'm out there and they contact me, to play on their tracks, or there's this currency of goodwill, but there's also, it generates work.
Yes.
So it's a different way of generating work, where we would have called people or sent messages and said, I'm in town, with Don, just calling him up, and then suddenly I was part of his band. That's magical.
Yeah.
So it happens in a different way now online, but no less magic and synchronicity. Short story about that. It was 2018, and I was doing a public workshop, clinic, they call it, a big masterclass for public, and it was sold out. It was huge in Adelaide. And so someone said to me, "Oh, David, did you see Instagram? It just lit up." And I said, "What's Instagram?" So I had a Facebook account for a few years, but doing nothing with it. I was really resistant, totally resistant. Now I've gone the other way. I put something up every day, pretty much, or every second day. And what really convinced me was that I thought, oh, okay, well, I wonder what that's all about. And I was coming up to a solo concert the start of 2019 in a club in Melbourne, Jazz Lab. So I thought, okay, I'll just put up a little tiny fragment of what I might do, and just, I don't think I even spoke to camera. It was just on my phone. And there were such lovely things coming back. There was one funny one about the colour of my shirt. It was pink, I thought, I won't respond to that one. And everything else I just responded, and it was just back, forth, lovely goodwill feeling. And I thought, that's very interesting, okay. So I just put my toe in. Somehow I'd fluked it that whatever I put up on Facebook went straight to Instagram.
Okay.
I don't know how I did it, but anyway. So it became very beneficial because there was all this other connection with people. And then a few months later, this is the story I wanted to share with you. Eric Adria's fantastic bass player from Black American. He came out to Australia maybe 30 years ago.
Okay.
And I was playing with him at the old Dizzy's, which was just opposite Corner Hotel in Richmond. We did a few gigs, and, every time we played together it was fantastic. And he plays acoustic and electric, really beautiful musician. Anyway, so I'm going through someone else's timeline. Isn't that amazing? Timeline. It's called a timeline, and it's called a feed as well. So I'm very interested in these words because it's what we feed ourselves and what we feed others through social media. So I only click on musical things that I'm interested in, beautiful things, and spiritual things. And so I get more of that. It's amazing. Even if I happen to chance upon some, even my friends getting into war with politics, I think, I'll just scroll on and good wishes and don't stay there and don't click anything and don't respond. So it is amazing how that works. Whatever you seek or whatever you engage with, you get more of that, which is life, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's showing us how life works. Anyway, so I scrolled down on someone else's timeline, saw Eric Adria, and looked like a 10-string bass. And I thought, what is that? So I just went straight to message, because you can message off everything these days. So I messaged off, Facebook, I think it was, and just with no expectation, I said, "Hi, Eric, it's David here. Haven't seen you for years." Because I didn't know where he ended up, and he happened to be in Canberra now. And I said, "What about this bass? We've got to play." It's very, very just light. Not like, let's plan something. Around the same time, I was on YouTube, and I'd found this bass player who was playing a cello bass, bowing, with effects, just beautiful. John Burgess. And he was in Canberra, and I thought, wow, where's he from? How did he develop all that? So beautiful. Anyway, around the same time, I was seeing on Facebook, there was a venue called Jazz House, the German H-A-U-S. Anyway, so it all connected up. Eric Adria, the bass player, was the teacher of John Burgess in Canberra at the ANU. And Jazz House in Canberra was run by Eric.
Oh,
It was at the Danish club. Every month they'd put on a special concert.
wow.
So guess what happened? A whole tour came out of those connections, because then we thought, oh, let's all play together, 2 bass players and drummer, at Jazz House.
Mm-hmm.
That became the start of then. Once you've got one date in, you can create other dates. And so it became like a 2-week tour up the East Coast, just from a timeline thing on Facebook.
Wow.
So it can happen. It can happen that it actually works for your benefit, because there can be a lot of negatives. Yeah.
We had a great story from a previous guest, Lillian Elbazi, who's a jazz singer here in Melbourne, and she created an indie rock band called Great Falls. And she found there was an American noise band, or like punk sort of noise band, with the same name. But she was like, oh, I'll put like a little sign to like differentiate it, but like I think it'll be okay. A bit nervous that like the Americans might, sue her or something. And then within a couple months, the lead singer of the band contacted her, said, oh, we really like your stuff. Would you like to collaborate on our next album? Oh, that's not my style, but I'd love to. Okay, and then, it led on, and then they did a tour together overseas and back and forth, and all just from,
great.
like you said,
so
just
good.
one little social media thing.
That's right.
It's quite amazing how that stuff can all...
Magic can happen. It's called synchronicity, isn't it? Where things just link in. Similarly with Anita Quayle and Nick, the bass player, guitarist. I was watching on Facebook through the pandemic. They're putting up some beautiful music, ambient music, so electric cello, guitar, bass through effects. Oh, it's just gorgeous. Similar thing, we're just goodwill connection through Facebook. And they ended up inviting me to come and play a track with them. Mm-hmm. I thought it was going to be a whole album's worth. They only needed one track. They'd got a grant from local government. And it was one of the most special sessions, really just how I'd love to play, which is to create from feeling, from ideas, sometimes from a title, choose a key, and off you go, So I think we recorded about 6 or 7 tracks.
Oh, wow.
They only needed one, but we had a whole day in the studio.
Cool.
And it was really well paid because of the grant. And so, yeah, special things can happen. And that's been a big change for me too, dealing with pitch.
What do you mean?
Well, when I said, choose a key.
Yes.
In my own projects, whether it be solo drumming or with collaborators, with people I invite to play with, I'll invariably choose a key so that I can use, say, singing bowl, kalimba. So I've got a singing bowl here. I just brought it along today. So when you rub this bowl, you get the note A. It's a perfect A that you can actually tune an orchestra to. And this has been used in 2 concertos that were written for me too. The singing bowls, they ring for such a long time, and then by rubbing the edge of it, they can be continuous for minutes or even an hour, depending on your arm. If you can keep your arm going. I did that experiment once for an hour.
Wow.
I got a little bit tired, but it was trippy. It's really trippy, just keeping this continuous hum going, I'll get a deep note going.
Yeah.
That's a deeper note there. So there are different levels of harmonics. So what I was mentioning about pitch is that, to start a piece, an improvised piece with that, it just sets the scene like a relative silence. It's like the blank canvas that anything's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So arising out of that, they can, depending on who's playing with me, they can start a melody. I can start rhythmic things. We just start colours, and pieces can be for for any length of time, and so much can happen. And then if I'm more active with the melody, this is a B minor kalimba. And the kalimba is just a little wooden box. It's quite resonant, and it's got some holes in it for vibrato. So putting my fingers over the holes. So. It's called a thumb piano sometimes, kalimba, Kalimba. But if you use all fingers, you can get some beautiful chords too. And then rhythmic. Sorry, it's a little bit off mark, but you can hear that.
Wow.
And when you put that on a drum, it'll resonate and give you much more volume, sometimes up to 50% more.
Wow.
Which happens on here, on this cushion as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's so evocative, isn't it? Even if just someone's playing one note. Yeah, so you start to hear, of course, rhythms, for a drummer, but I know we're not just talking about drumming, but I think for musicians, if we can sing something, we can create, we can compose. And I think for years I had a real inferiority complex about that.
Really?
Yeah, as a drummer.
Yes.
Thinking, I don't know as many chords, and I don't know how the whole, a piano player, of course, is going to be so developed. It's almost like a little bit like, do you like this idea,
Mm-hmm.
But now, after a long time of collaborating, I bring melodies, sometimes bass lines. I might leave the chords open or very, very simple. And I've had feedback from other musicians that, that's great, David. You are actually giving something so simple. Now I can create something with that.
Mm.
And it's a beautiful melody because you're not fully aware harmonically. It's great. It's left it open. So that can be a real positive.
Yeah.
To think from the drumming point of view or a producer point of view too. Or a bigger concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and drummers are natural producers, and I would say leaders too. Or co-leaders, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things I could ask you about the different co-leader things you've done. And just so many things. Like I should say, I'm a massive fan of so many different things you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's really special to be able to talk with you, and hear you play the kalimba and everything. It's so stunning. It's giving me it. I was getting flashbacks to when I was a kid, and I used to just watch lots of music videos on YouTube and things, but there's an Earth, Wind and Fire song called Kalimba.
That's right.
I'd heard it, and then finally when I got to see what it was, and I remember my mum got one, and I used to play it at home, and
fantastic.
It's such a beautiful thing. I was getting all the memories.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And for us, for drummers, to get into pitch, and I suppose, if you're doing it from a classical point of view of a percussionist, then the classical percussionist needs to cover timpani, which is pitched, xylophone, marimba, a lot of pitched instruments. And so it's not a big stretch for them to be doing snare drum, then go to xylophone but I think for drum kit, what can happen is a bit of a closed concept. And that's okay. That's fine. There's the whole thing of specialization, and that is very powerful. But then also, if you feel, let me say it another way, if you feel that you're a musician first and you just happen to play the drums, that's the choice of instrument. It could be bass. I love bass. I don't play bass, but if I didn't play drums, I think the main one would be bass for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's something I know you'll relate to. I'm just seeing a bass on your wall.
Hey, yeah. And another two over there.
Okay. Yeah.
My partner plays bass.
Oh,
so,
fantastic. That's great. So I know you'll relate to this. Like this harmonic that keeps ringing as they go back to the... and there's harmonics that just ring for ages over top of... I love that effect. That musical effect can be done with the drum kit, which is... Because it could be a bell, it could be a triangle. I used to put triangles on the kit, off stands and things. So now I have things like this. This is called tingshas. Very cleansing sound, so beautiful. And I've got one of those. This is two little bells on a string, attached to a string. But I've just got one hanging off the cymbal stand, so I can hit that with a stick and get that effect that the bass players can get. These harmonics that ring through rhythmic things. I love that. Just love it.
What is it that you like about that when you're playing a groove at the same time as being able to put that over the top?
It's something about, the contrasts and the extremes of the spectrum of staccato, short notes, and then legato, this beautiful sustained ding, and whatever the note is, that rings through something. Because with drumming, there can be a lot of short sounds. Even cymbals, when you record them, you might only get a third or even a quarter of that duration of the note. Because if we're in a room and you hear the cymbal, and then it goes to silence. So when you hear it in the track or with the music or in the whole drum kit, it's gone.
Yeah.
A $500 cymbal. Okay, right. Nice effect. Yeah, okay, I understand. So depending on how things are recorded too, these days I'm recording a lot from home with really good Earthworks mics and good preamps, in my recording situation. And it's something I've not been able to do before or I haven't done, up to this point. Actually, that was a positive that came out of the pandemic, to set up a home studio because I need to have something like that. And now to be able to bring the levels up to where I hear it, so brushes, they actually are really present, where in the past, going into recording studios, and I've thought, oh, gee, the brushes are way too in the distance, So being able to design the music a lot more, how I hear it, it's very special.
So much more creative control when you're doing it all yourself.
Very satisfying, yeah. I had an idea a little while back. I don't know if I should tell you because someone will take it up. I haven't done this yet, but it is a good idea. Well, it's interesting to me anyway, which is this one track, maybe it's a 5 or 6 minute track, and it might be a quartet or a quintet, whatever. So 4 or 5 players playing down a track and then releasing 4 or 5 mixes, depending on how many people are in the band, and it's called How I Hear It.
Oh.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah.
So the bass player gets to mix that track, the drummer mixes the track without the others there.
Yeah.
The guitarist or keyboard player and a vocalist, So I think it would be just very revealing.
Yeah.
And it'd be fascinating to hear how different it can sound.
Yeah.
Because one of the things for me over the years, with respect to the people I've played with, very seldom have the drums sounded like they sounded in the studio, like really rich and full and how I sound.
Yes.
So they've been either mixed back or compressed or, very tiny, or it sounds like in another room or something, apart from my own projects, of course, not that I put them right up the front, but they'll just have their own beautiful width and space in the music and blended beautifully. But so, yeah, this thing of recording is a very, very interesting thing, because once you've played for someone's project and they've paid you, you've earned income from it, it's theirs, basically. Unless you've created something in terms of the APRA, the copyright, the writing. So once it's theirs, they can do what they like, and that's a big thing to let go of, to say, okay, well, that's how they wanted it to sound.
Yeah.
That's the professional nature of things. But then the artist in me, that's predominant thing these days, is the artist would say, okay, in the first email to someone who would like me to play on I'm just going to set some conditions. And one of the conditions, which I've been doing for a few years, is to say, once you've got to the stage we're mixing, I'd love to be another set of ears, no charge. If I can suggest, number one, for my own integrity of my own sound, but also it might help the project with what I hear as well, as an experienced musician. And people go for that. They say, oh, thank you, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's been some very successful things happen like that, where it's come back to me, it's been so compressed, and I thought, and very graciously, the email goes back, oh, this is sounding great, but perhaps just take a little bit of the compression off, just let this bit more air in the cymbals, it'll help the track. So it's not about ego and like me sounding great or something. That's by the by in a way. Because it is true, if you've got drums in a track and you let them breathe, the track is going to breathe. It's going to sound amazing. So, yeah, it's a big difference these days.
David, you were talking about how when you're in your space, you try and create the sound as you hear the drums. And I was wondering, given the impact of microphone placement and the way that, physically you're sitting behind the drums, whereas most of the audience or listeners are sitting in front.
It's a great question.
Yeah, what is it that you're trying to create, and is it like how do you go about it versus in the competing world of, well, everybody else in the band's hearing it from a different position, so of course they don't hear it like you.
That's right. I think it really comes back to, for me, all of the favourite albums that I've ever heard. Yeah, so when I think of Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, the drums are present and they're huge. And there's a big presence in there in terms of the musical content. So it's not just providing time and groove, but there's a character. So I go for that, but then there's also, in the jazz world, the Weather Report is a big one for me. Where the percussion, and Santana actually, early Santana, percussion and drums are such a major part of the colour. So I'm thinking compositionally, I'm thinking like producer-wise, that the drums and percussion have their own space, blended, but they're not getting buried. And I think that's it can be a problem in rock where it might be just the snare drum is the main thing, and a lot of the other parts of the kit are getting buried, where it could actually give more excitement to the whole music, music thing. So I'm generalizing here, but I think, mainly about the things that have really appealed to me about the music, not just the drums.
Yes.
Because when I'd listen, even from, my teens, when I was listening to music, I was never just isolating the drums in my listening. It was about the whole effect, the parts together and how it's all linking up. Because I think that's another thing that can happen for any instrumentalist, is that there's just a focus on that instrument, and that really can unbalance things, in terms of perception. So to answer your question about the mic placement, whether it's from the drummer's point of view or from the front, it's always been quite an issue for me. Sometimes I've wanted to have someone play the kit so I could stand out the front and have a listen. But of course, they're not playing how I play.
Yeah.
So it's going to sound totally different anyway.
Yeah.
But it might be just something like the bass drum is too dampened, in that'll come out the front if I say to the person, please just very, very quickly let the beater off the bass drum. Don't leave it on, just so I can hear the drum itself. So that sometimes has given me a good indication of basis, basic sort of feeling about how it's being projected. But we don't fully know, do we? When we're on stage, how it's coming across, and especially once you've got a sound engineer involved too, it can be sounding completely different to what you're doing up on stage. So in terms of recording, for me, it's now being much more active and making friend of the engineer. You want to do that anyway. You're not just coming in as a cold professional. We form relationships, and because of the relationships, the music's going to be much stronger, much clearer, more refined, more developed, rather than just providing a professional service. And there's a time and place for that, but even then you still want to give your heart to whatever you're doing and to make the connection with people so they're happy too.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's always a balance, isn't it? But those two things, that really is a good indication in myself of what I've always gone for, was just the desire to be a professional, able to handle anything, be very flexible, and give people what they need or want. That's one thing. And then the balance of what I call projects of the heart, to things that you're working on and you're doing absolutely from the core of you, the inner being, from the soul, very soulful projects.
Yeah.
Always having those both going.
Well, I'm acutely aware of time, but I would love to, indulge and try and convince you to come back and have another conversation with me, so we can dive into things like that.
Yeah, great.
But we should play the final two segments of the podcast.
Okay.
So we've got this segment where I get each guest to ask a question of the next guest.
Oh.
And it creates like this interesting train of questions and things. So I've got a question for you from our previous podcast guest.
Okay, good.
A turntablist and DJ who goes by the name Mishap.
All right, I think I have one. It's a little bit unorthodox, but if you could create a whole new project out of your favorite 3 bands or musicians or artists or DJs, who would they be and what would you call it and why?
That's great. That is a fantastic question. I'm just having deja vu. Very interesting just now. Okay. Well, this is very, very current for me because I'm playing with the idea very seriously of putting a new band together for the first time in decades.
Wow.
And really choosing the right players to go towards music that's very influenced by Weather Report, by Lyle Mays, the Pat Metheny band.
Yep.
Lyle passed away, not that I knew him, but I did make a connection with him on one stage. There might have been a possibility of playing, but anyway, it didn't happen. But Lyle is just a gorgeous musician, keyboard player. I've been listening to a lot of his solo stuff as well. And I've just been listening to Vince Mendoza Orchestra, which is an orchestra put together, I think, in Europe. And they were guesting different people. And the Mendoza, he's a composer, arranger, and also conductor. It's worth looking up because what he's put together over the years, over the last few decades, it's not so well known, not so popular, so-called popular. But, oh my goodness, it's just gorgeous music. I think it's, to answer that question, what I'm looking at is a semi-orchestral approach to really funky and fusiony jazz. I suppose you call it improvised music, but very gorgeous sounding, very melodic. Not what I would call blip-blop music. Blip-blop meaning just sound for sound's sake. Because sometimes with free music, it can get a bit just sort of, the musicians are having a great time, but no one wants to listen to it.
Right.
I'm really into melody, and I love gorgeous harmonies, and the orchestral approach to things, in terms of dynamics too, really attracts me. To have musicians around me that we can dovetail down into this most gossamer, fine, very fine gossamer-like dynamics, and then very powerful blooming into these huge dynamics, and like the power of rock meeting, very, very ambient. So I've got some people in mind, not that I should mention anyone yet because I don't even know if they're interested or available, but that's what I'm heading towards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to give people something that they are missing from probably the 70s, actually.
Wow, that's very exciting.
Well,
what would you like to ask our next guest?
Okay. Okay, here's the question that I would like to ask, and I don't know who's going to get this question, so this will be very interesting. What is the main motivation in your creating, in your composition, in your way of creating music, your way of creating whatever art you're involved in? What is the main motivation? What are you wanting to give and to experience yourself, of course, but what are you wanting to give through that?
It's such a great question, and like an interesting thing, I think, we've had some similar questions like that on the podcast, and it's been really clear that some people really think about that, and others, are thinking about other things.
Sure. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see who gets the question.
Yeah, I'd love to find out.
All right, we should finish with 5 quick answer questions.
Okay.
So,
yep.
David, what is your favourite venue to play in Melbourne?
Oh, undoubtedly the Melbourne Recital Centre, small venue.
Oh,
The
yes.
Salon.
Yep.
Yeah. Haven't played there for a while, but I did a lot of concerts there.
What would be your dream venue globally to play at?
That's a good question too. Dream venue. Well, there's a beautiful classical place, and I've forgotten the name of it. So I think it's in Germany. But you sometimes see it in films. It's very classical, very beautiful Art Nouveau kind of booths, and apparently the acoustics are incredible. Yeah.
What is your coffee order?
Soy latte, no sugar.
Why is that so funny?
I thought you were going to get me one.
Oh, sorry, I should.
No, I've got half of my soy latte waiting in the car, in the keep cup for the drive home.
What is your favourite place to get food after a gig in Melbourne?
Home. But I'm not eating late at night these days. Yeah.
And finally, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Oh, can I have a little think of that?
Yeah.
Just keep doing what you're doing, because you are going to be amazed with what you achieve. It's not what you thought as a little child. It's even better than what you thought. Things are going to happen that you can't even imagine yet, which is true. To have 2 drum kit concertos written for me.
Oh, yeah.
To be at the front of orchestras and playing solo drum. Yeah, it's not even dream come true, but it's beyond that. It's like I wouldn't have even imagined. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being so generous in, sharing some insights into the things that you're thinking about and experiences you had. It's just been so lovely to speak with you.
Thank you, Luke. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah.
I will put some...
And I must say, on mic, that you are one of the great listeners. That in interviews it's very important for the interviewer to just allow the person to speak, and you do that very naturally. I don't feel any tension in your stillness in between the listening. It's a very natural trait you have. It's very wonderful.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll direct like listeners that want to get in touch to you, probably to your website and maybe some links to like Patreon and your social media profiles.
Yeah.
What would be your preferred, I suppose, method of contact? Would it be through your website?
I think websites are not as active these days. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm really not sure about that. But if someone wanted to go by messenger or just email off the website's fine.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David Jones.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks for joining us on Our Drummers Musicians. I hope you enjoyed diving into the world of another musician as much as I did. Help us grow by leaving a review and sharing the podcast with your friends, family, favorite artist, or anyone else who might enjoy it. For more info and updates, visit ourdrummersmusicians.com. See you next time.